आओ जी, आओ जी, आओ जी आया।
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Maja House. We have a treat in store for you this evening as we talk to Anand Neelakanthan, best-selling author of Asura, Tale of the Vanquished, the Ajaya series, Vanara, the Legend of Bali, Sugriv, and Tara. And Asura is Ravan's Ramayan. So, as you can see, Anand Neelakanthan never hesitated to tell these epic tales in his own way, with wit, with some irreverence, and a fierce commitment, I think, to giving voice to those who have not spoken, to those who are marginalized and oppressed. So that's really wonderful to see. We have a similar thing here in the new book that we are going to talk about today, which is called Valmiki's Women, where we talk about the women from the Ramayana. And we have, I think, 5 stories in the book, all of which we will talk about today. I'd like to welcome both of you, Anand as well as Pratyaksha, who's going to be in conversation with him. Anand Neelakanthan also has written a number of screenplays for hugely popular television series as well, including Siya Ke Ram, which I happen to know well, and the blockbuster series that you've all heard of and which will soon come out as a Netflix serial, which is called Bahubali. Welcome again to both of you. Pratyaksha, of course, she's not a stranger to Maja House. She's also visited us in person, and she is a poet. She's a well-known writer, translator, and she's also an artist. So let's all now just sit back and enjoy Anand's take on these stories from the Ramayana and these 5 women. Some of them really well-known characters. We have Manthara here, who's normally, sort of conniving and evil and horrible. And she's the one who sort of pushed Kekai to push the prince out of his kingdom. And so maybe we're going to see another side of her. And then there is Minakshi, who has beautiful eyes and who transformed into the embodiment of ugliness and utmost lust in the character of Shrupnakha, with her nose getting cut off and all that. And, that's also how the story goes forward in the Ramayana. So this and the other women, some of whom are not so well known. Let's listen to this. I think it's going to be a riveting conversation. So over to you now, Pratyaksha, to tell us and get Anand to tell us about the stories.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get Anand to tell us about his take. Thank you, Preeti. Thank you, Maja House. And I want to specially thank Preeti for introducing me to this wonderful book by you, Anand. So when I was younger, I was reading my first introduction to the epic tales of Mahabharata and Ramayana were through Chanda Mama. I think most of us have read that in our childhoods. And then later, when I grew up, I read some other books also. And while reading Valmiki's Women, I was very much reminded of Shivaji Sawant's Mrityunjay, which he has written on Karn. And he has, like Karn is the typical aligned with the Kauravas, and he is one of the anti heroes of the epic. And then Shivaji Sawant made him so human, so vulnerable, and you can feel all his, the sense of loss and betrayal, and yet how he arises out of the victimhood with so much of grace and dignity. And while I was reading your book, that was what I was getting reminded of. And then, of course, the tales of Mahabharata and Ramayana, how they have impacted us in our lives. And I have been reading other books also, like the Mahasamar series by Narendra Kohli, and Pratibha Rai has written Draupadi, and Chitra Banerjee Divakurni again on the Palace of Illusions. And out of all these books, and then I come to Kalasov's Ka, which is a sort of, it's part fantasy and part mythology. And Ka is again one book which has like totally given me so much of sense of acceptance whenever there is something wrong in the world, especially like last year when we were during COVID. And I remember picking up the book and reading parts of it and feeling such a sense of calm inside me. And like I just like to quote something from that. It takes millions of years for the gods to pass from one era to another, centuries for mankind. The gods change their names and do the same things over and over again. But they do it with such smaller changes, changes so subtle so as to be pure repetition. And again, to that, I would like to add again another line from Yog Vasisht, which, as you would be knowing, it is a structured discourse between sage Vasisht and Ram, in which he says, the world is like a leftover impression of a story told. So, like you have been writing so much on the mythological characters, and especially for Valmiki's woman, when I was reading the book, it immediately transported me to a world of women which gave a sense of logic, a purpose to how they were behaving or acting. And these women like Kaikeyi and Manthara and Surpanakha, they are, like the bad women in Ramayana. They are not the heroines. And when we read history or when we read these tales, these are like, there's so many strands of interpretation to these stories. And I like to believe that Mahabharata and Ramayana were written in different periods by different people. And sometimes I think maybe one of them would have been a woman to put some sort of, a rebelliousness in them. And then you write about them, and you have like picked up the characters who are not the main lead, so to say, in these books, and then you put a spotlight on them. So my first question to you is, did you have a plan when you were writing that you're going to write like this, put a warm light on these women? How did the book begin actually?
Thank you, Diksha, and thank you, Maja House. See, this is a part of the series which I have been writing in the last 10 years. So I started with Asura, Tale of the Vanquished, which told Ravan's Ramayan. Then I did the television serial Siya Ke Ram, which was Sita's Ramayan. Then I also did Mahabali Hanuman for Sony TV, which was again Hanuman's Ramayan. Then I came with Vanara, which is the Kishkinda story with Bali, Sugriva, and Tara, that love triangle. And this book forms that part of the series, Ramayana series. Mahabharata series also I have been writing from Duryodhana's point of view. I had written, of course, which doesn't belong to mythology, but which became quite famous was the Bahubali, which I had done in between. Yeah. So this is not like one-off book. This is a part of the series. It doesn't mean that you have to read everything, but it is in the same way. Each are standalone books, but I love to take the side which is not often talked about. That's why I started with Ravan. Then I talked about Bali, who is always portrayed as this evil brother, evil twin of Sugriva. So I told this tale from that. And then I went to the women of Ramayana. So this is the first part in that. Parallelly also I'll be writing women of Mahabharata. So in this what I have done is there are many women in Ramayana who have not got their due at all, or who have been portrayed differently during the last 1,000 years perhaps, since the advent of Bhakti tradition. So suddenly Manthara becomes evil, Shurpanakha. Otherwise, originally if you see, these people are not evil as such. Tadaka becomes evil, Manthara becomes evil. So there is no concept of evil in Indian Puranas. It never was. The concept of evil itself is a very much Abrahamic concept, which came especially in the Gangetic plain after the invasions happened. So a lot of cultural influence had happened, where there is a kind of duality in everything. Like if you see the Abrahamic religion, I'm not saying one is good, one is bad, but why our storytelling changed in between, especially in certain parts of the country, is due to the influence of Abrahamic religion. The Abrahamic religions like Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Marxism, which also incidentally exhibits all the all the aspects of a religion, all work with the aspect of opposing duals. good versus evil, God versus Satan, heaven versus hell, sin versus virtue. So that concept came to our fundamental concept of the Dharmic religion, what you call the Indian traditions, which is Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and other traditional Indian religion, folk religions. They all are based either on the will of God, like many folk tradition, or on the karma and karma bala. So there is no per se evil in the Indian society. So wherever the historical accident of invasion and rule by foreigners didn't happen, that part of India, which we now call as India, especially the east of India and the south of India, the traditions continue to be told in the old format how it used to be. So there is no demure Sita in Malayalam Ramayana or Telugu Ramayana or Tamil Ramayana. The demure Sita is a Tulsidas Ji's concept. The obedient Sita, what we always talk about, the Pativrata Sita, it is not Valmiki Sita at all. The only somebody who ticks that is Urmila, perhaps. That's why Urmila never fascinated me.
True.
Urmila, husband says, you don't come with me, and she says, okay, I won't come with you, I stay at home. But Sita is a rebel.
Yeah. She is really, the first single mother.
Single mother. So I've been telling this in some of my interviews also earlier and sessions also. So my storytelling is mostly based. So what happened in the late 90s when we were all growing up, or what we are also conveying to our children, is the Ramayana and Sagas Ramayana. So what TV essentially does is instead of the multiple facets of Ramayana, multiple versions of Ramayana, it gave prominence to one Ramayana. And people started believing that is the only Ramayana. But as such, every Ramayana, there are thousands of Ramayana. A.K. Ramanujan talks about 300 Ramayans. 300 is a complete Ramayana. To take small stories, there is innumerable, maybe lakhs of Ramayana. Like Sita came here, this happened here. That kind of stories you go, you can find across the country. They are all sometimes contradictory, sometimes complementary. But what happens is there is a distinct difference in the storytelling within the geography. So there is no lynching of Ravan in the parts where their Mughal rule was not there. Because Vijayadashmi is the festival of knowledge, a festival of Durga in the east, festival of Saraswati in the south, or Lakshmi in Maharashtra. It is only the Dasara is Ravan getting lynched is only in the parts where the Sultanate and the Mughal Empire was there. And just putting a perspective into it.
Yeah. Actually, the very interesting thing about these epics are they are like the modern bestsellers. They've got all the masala in it. And I think nobody is able to really beat that sort of formula, And there are so many gray areas. Every character, you'll be a little bit surprised that this character is supposed to be evil, but then that character will do something which is very humane. And what you have done, or some other writers also, is to give a logic to the activities, good or bad. And that is, I think, something which is like adding one more strand to the narrative. Like you said, there are 300 Ramayana and 300 more or odd more Mahabharat, and everybody is putting their own interpretation to it. And you have added one more strand to the whole narrative. That is the beauty of it.
It is not, I didn't say 300 Ramayans. I said there are innumerable Ramayans, more than a lakh perhaps. Take the partial stories. And the full versions, Mahabharata, there is more than 1100 versions.
Right, absolutely.
So what essentially it does is now, because of the television, especially when there was only one channel and the entire country watched that, there is nothing wrong in telling that version, but it is not the version. There is no the version. There is no the book in India.
Absolutely.
There is no the holy book, no the version. There are multiple versions. We don't have one holy book. We have a whole library of it.
And that also gives a freedom for anybody to explore the other angles, other perspectives to a particular character or the story.
Essentially, what it is, this is, as I said, all the earlier Ramayans or the Ramayans which are not influenced by the Brahmani culture, they deal with karma and karma bala. It is never about the good Ram versus the evil Ravan. Because we go back to Vishnu Purana, Ravan is none other than the Dwarapalaka of, there is a gatekeeper of Vishnu.
Yeah.
who gets cursed and who comes here. So he has asked the choice, the Jaya and Vijaya, the two doorkeepers who are cursed, they are given the choice whether you want to be a buck for 100 lives or you want to be my antagonist.
Yeah.
And they are sensible people. Who wants to be a buck unless you are such a big idiot? So they said, I don't want to be a buck. I will be the antagonist. And so it becomes a play. It becomes a play between the god, the Vishnu as a god, and his own Dwarapalakas, and it's a play for the world. So that's how it has been told originally. And it's all about karma and karma. That is why when we start judging Ramayana with this Abrahamic religious angle, that there is a strict courts of morality and strict commandments are there, then you start judging people along with that. So you start judging Ram, you start judging Ravan, you start putting people in column. But all these were written much before all these concepts we were familiar with, our ancestors were familiar with.
Yes.
So that's what we are essentially trying to do. We are trying to bring it back to what it was originally, rather than what it became in the last 800, 900 years.
True. So you've written all these series in this genre. What was it? Was it something incubating in your mind for a long time that I'm going to do like this, write in this genre? Or was it some creative epiphany that I'm going to touch this, rich source of material that is there and I will write in this area?
It has pretty much got to do with the growing up. I grew up in a temple town which has more than 100 temples. Many of them are more than 1,000, 1,400 years old. They have this, the classical art forms like Kathakali or the Kudiyatams and Ottanthullals, the traditional art forms which not just draws inspiration, all the stories played are this. Like 7 days they take to tell this tale, 10 days they take to tell this tale. So I grew up listening to that, seeing that live performing, then oral artists coming and performing across the country. They come and perform. So this was imbibed in me. When I wanted to write, when I thought that I should write, I wrote what I knew. So it's not that I decided, no, I'm going to change this. I wrote how it is rather than what it became. So every book, this is my 11th book. Apart from this, along with this book, actually one companion book had come in Audible, the same Westland Amazon company, an audio book. It's called Many Ramayanas, Many Women. It has come both in English and Hindi. Here, what I have done is I have explored the entire Ramayana with whatever 20, 30 years of research which I have done. And I told the entire Ramayana is a 16-hour talk series done by a voice artist. So there, all these are brought in. All the characters, all the different Ramayanas from Thai version to Indonesian version to Philippines version to Arabian version to Islamic version to Christian versions of Ramayana are brought in.
That is wonderful. Okay. So while I was reading the book, the Surpanakha story was the one which I found really very lyrical. The Marich and how they go back to nature. It's absolutely wonderful. And it is such a statement also in present times to go back to nature, to Prakriti. And like you said, that these stories were written because how you were brought up in that town. So is this also so much of your faith and belief in going back to nature that shaped the story? You have written it absolutely beautifully.
Thank you very much. See, I always believed in our Puranas there is another conflict which always comes. There's a conflict which is also a conflict now. That's why all these Puranas become very eternal. The conflict between the progress and what is natural. So Ramayana is also another tale, not when he reaches Lanka, but otherwise when Ram goes, it's a city going to the forest. It's not the forest coming to the city. Absolutely. Whether it is Kishkinda or Tataka. Same conflict happens in Mahabharata also.
Yes.
The Indraprastha was Khandiva Prastha before. The entire forest was burned to build the city.
Yes.
How different it is from what is happening now.
Yes.
So that is why this become all the problems which these people are. The great thing about Ramayana, Mahabharata or the great Tamil epics or the other things in India is that at any point of time, whichever state of life you are, whoever you are, whichever gender you are, whichever subculture, Indian subculture you belong to, whether south, north, east, west, it doesn't matter. If you are a human, you will find at least one character with which you can identify with. Because these are not the tale of gods. The concept of God itself is very different in India. We are all corrupted now with the sky daddy God. A God who sits in the sky and give judgment upon you. That sky daddy God is not an Indian concept at all. Indian concept is about Aham Brahmasmi. I am the God. I am the part of the nature. So it almost borders on atheism, if you really see.
True. Absolutely.
God as a friend is the Bhakti tradition. So that is something which slightly went away from that. But it didn't go as the judging God. There is no judging God for us. I'm not saying it is wrong. That's another way of looking at life. So through my books, I'm trying to bring back what I believe could have been what it was. That's all.
Absolutely. It is like a circle, isn't it? So we keep connecting points, going back into time, and like everything we believe is whatever is happening is Maya. It's a projection in a way. So, like you said, that city going to forest, or vice versa. That is what is happening. So every time we reach a point, we try to get back, isn't it? So now these five. Let's come specifically to this book. So these are the five women in a very strong patriarchal setup. And like you said, there is one version which depicts them as like Sita, docile, submissive. Manthara is the conniving person. Kaikeyi is the one who pushes, all the evil things to happen. And then I read Manthara here and Kaikeyi here. And Kaikeyi is, I think I really fell in love with the character. Because she is the warrior woman. She is fighting with king. And she gets the boon at that time. So even now, she's a partner with her husband. And then I think in one point of time, she tells Shanta that you are the heir to the clan, when he is giving her for adoption, and she's trying to convince her not to accept that. And that is such a what to say, I mean, the boldest statement that I can find any woman even telling now, and to be telling in that time is something amazing.
Actually, Ramayana itself, there is a family like that. The Janakas family. He didn't have sons. He didn't do Putragameshti, right? So everything is there. We have to we have to look at it rightly. That's all. So Janaka is considered as the wisest of all kings in not just Ramayana, but in the entire Puranic world. Many of the Upanishads are dedicated to him. Many of the Upanishads were told before him. Some of the Upanishads he had written. He is considered as a Rajarishi, and whereas Dasharatha is a man of passion, he is a man steeped in tradition. So what Valmiki beautifully does, and the poets who came after him beautifully do, is to place Janaka against, against. There is nothing, there is no conflict in this thing. It's another example, it's another way of looking at life. Both Janaka, in some Ramayanas, all the four daughters are Janakas. In some, it is his brothers. Two are Sudagirti and Mandavi, who becomes Bharat's and Shatrughan's wives. They are his brothers, Kushadwaja's children. But either of it, they have only princesses. They don't have princes. They don't do Putra Kameshti. There is no Putri Kameshti, right? There is only Putra Kameshti. They want only Putra. So, but Janaka doesn't even talk about it. There is not even a mention. He's not worried about whether there is a son or a daughter. Yeah. He brings up his children without thinking whether it is son or a daughter.
And on the other hand, Dashrath, he is ready to sacrifice his daughter for sons.
Yeah. So that is that is
the two.
Why it reflects life is because of that, no?
Yeah.
Even though you see both kind of families, right? That's how it reflects.
This is life, isn't it? Like it contains all sort of virtues or non-virtues, so to say.
So standing in judgment saying that Dashrath is wrong, Ram is wrong, because Ram, when we say God, and God cannot do any wrong, again, a very Semitic concept. Ram is not God. Ram is avatar of God. He's a Manushya avatar of God. That is, he has come in the form of human. So when he comes in the form of human, if he doesn't have any flaws, then it is God himself. Then what is the need of calling him Manushya? So that is why he has flaws. Flaws in the sense they are not flaws as it. These are his karma, and he does certain karmas. He pays the price for it in the next Janma as Krishna. So there are, when we go talk, we'll talk about with those all those examples, where it comes, how it comes,
So
how the
actually,
cycle ignites.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So in those versions, or wherever we find if he is God, he's not, behaving in an appropriate manner. So what you are doing is you are giving that the reason or the justification behind such acts, why it
No.
happened. So no, in a
No.
way, like in Sita and Surpanakha's conversation.
I'm not giving any justification there.
No,
There is no
an
need to-
explanation. You're giving an explanation for us to understand.
I am giving a
It is
viewpoint.
another angle that you're putting there.
I'm giving a viewpoint. There is
Yes.
no need to justify anything. That's all I am saying.
Yeah.
Viewpoints, like there is this famous conversation which happens in most of the Ramayana between Ram and Bali. So in Ram and Bali, when after Ram has shot Bali, he stands behind a tree, hides behind a tree and shoots. One of the most criticized aspect of how Ram did. Whatever argument Ram gives, he gives it as a human. First he says that you took the wife of your brother. Then Bali says he also took my wife. He first took my wife. He thought I am dead. He closed the door. He didn't even come and check up.
Yeah.
When I was fighting with Dundubi, I had gone into the cave. He didn't come to check whether I am dead or not. He took it as an opportunity. He closed it and took my wife. Then Ram says, the second argument Ram says is, I am the king. Hunting is my dharma. And I hunted an animal. Then Bali says, then if I am an animal, whoever is powerful, he takes the meat. Then how is it wrong that I took my brother's wife? So again, Ram is stumped. Then the Ram says that you are evil. Then Bali says, in what way I am evil? I am the king. I am for my people. I have done only good for them. I have protected them well. Then Ram says, the next one Ram says is, as an animal, I can kill you. Again, he repeats it. Then Bali says, animals hunt for food. Will you eat me? So Ram doesn't have any reply. But it goes as a open-ended question. But how it gets explained is, in Mahabharata, the same Bali comes as Jara and kills Krishna. The same way. Whether next life is there, whether there is Atma, these are all different discussions. But these stories were written with that story logic. So using a Victorian era morality to judge them is as stupid as using the karmic cycle to judge a biblical story or a Quran story. That's all I'm saying. So whatever Ram does, in the next Janma, he pays the price for it. The same thing comes as a cycle, again and again. So there are thousands of examples like that. So what I am telling is, I am not justifying Ram. There is no need to justify Ram. There is no need to justify Ravan. There is no need to justify anyone. The only thing that requires perhaps shedding some light is to take away the dust and show that all these stories are about action of certain people, the choices they make, the action they take on those choices, and the price they pay for it. Good price or bad price. The fruits, the karma bhala, what you call it. This is all the Puranas are about. So everything, it may not be justified. Like, because how do you judge? How do you think something is justified or not? You sit at a point and you are viewing. The moment you go to the other side, what appeared to be wrong suddenly appears to be right. It's like putting light. Shadow is on the other side. You imagine that side is a dark side. You go there and put shadow. Shadow is on this side. That's all what I am doing. Or that's all what so many people have been doing for last thousands of years. It's a continuing tradition.
Absolutely. Because in any of I'm again talking about them as characters. Somehow I want to believe that they are not gods. And these are stories written over periods of time by many people. And it was, that is my belief. It may be wrong or right, but things have been adding up to it. And when I'm saying justification, I'm only saying that when Ram or Manthara or Kaikeyi, when they are doing something, there is always some justification behind their action. Maybe we have not seen that purpose.
Correct.
So even in that Surpanakha and Sita conversation is very, very nice, because it suddenly these are the two women who are on, on the same page on empathy and on feelings and, loss. And they have that conversation, and that is if you go towards the traditional version, then these women would not be friends at all. They would find nothing in common. But you have given both of them so much of a space between them, which is so intimate, so warm, and they are able to heal each other to some extent, of whatever is happening in their life. And that is what you have done in these to these characters. So again, like you said, throwing light on shadow areas or wherever. Maybe as if you're reading the normal version, you're not even going to going behind, the actions. But somebody needs to do that, because it's a completely rounded up thing. Like we human beings are, we are good and bad and lot of gray. That is what these characters or gods or whatever way you want to explain. It is that only. So, and then I feel that in all these traditional versions of our epics, the feminine voices are very astonishingly absent. Nobody has written so much about them. And then you bring up all these women characters in this book specifically. And then you are delving into the feminine side. Again, I'm referring to the conversation between Sita and Surpanakha, and the relationship between Manthara and Kaikeyi and Shanta. So it's like a sisterhood, It is something very nice of women being with each other in all these times. So are you? It's very interesting to get into a feminine head, so to say. You being a man, you've done that. So tell me about that.
I have no clue. I tried to get into all characters. So in Asura, I was trying to get into Ravan's character. So when I get into Ravan's character, it is very, what do you call, many women didn't find it palatable sometimes. But I said that is how he is. So he has to be I didn't try to make Ravan into God in my Asura.
I'm going to read that book now.
There, Ravan is very patriarchal, he is very masculine, and he thinks like a man. So I am getting into that character. Whereas when I am writing Vanara, where Bali is a tribal man. So he doesn't come from the same tradition of Ravan. He thinks about women in a much different way. He fears women also at the same time. He fears Tara also a bit. But at the same time, it is not like how Ram thinks or how Ravan thinks. Here, Ayodhya has never treated its women well, is what I felt, whichever version of Ramayana I read. Ramayana has treated its women well, but not Ayodhya. Ayodhya is a city. Perhaps it has been deliberately done by the poets of those Sara, because which women had got happiness in Ayodhya is a big question. Not in Mithila, not in Kishkinda, not in Lanka. Lanka, both Sulojana, Indrajit's wife, or Mandodari, they lived a good life. Tara lived a good life, whatever it is done, said and done. Both the brothers were loving to her in Kishkinda. In Mithila, they didn't even think about a male child. It is in Ayodhya there is a problem, to really see. Ayodhya, not just this generation, for generations it is like this. Right from Harishchandra, who sells his wife, who is a epitome of Dharma, it has been always like that. So it is a choice which in our culture both are available. Both Mithila and Ayodhya are. I'm not telling about the modern sense about where Mithila is, where Ayodhya is. I'm not getting. I'm talking about the things in these epics, which is the kind of tradition we want. That is what I'm trying to open up this question. So Kaikeyi comes from a different culture there. Manthara comes from a different culture there. Shanta goes to a different culture.
Yes.
In Anga, she is treated differently. And then with Rishyasringa, she is treated totally different because he's a Rishi.
Yes.
So it is about Ayodhya itself. No? When Sita is out of Ayodhya, she is treated well. When she comes back, that is when she gets abandoned. So there is a Ayodhya as a city is very mysterious when you think like that. Whether it is Kaikeyi, whether it is Kausalya, whether it is Urmila, whether it is Mandavi, Srutakirti, none of them had a proper married life when Ram had gone, including Sita perhaps. But Sita says in many Ramayans, only Tulsidas Ramayana it comes that they were like brahmacharis. But in other Ramayans, they are deeply in love. So in Bhavabhudi's Ramayana, how it happens is Sita fondly remembers the forest days when he was with Ram. She is totally free, away from Ayodhya, away from this thing of society. It's like an extended picnic for her until.
Yes.
So in Bhavabhudi Ramayana, it's very poetically told how she talks to Ram nostalgically, how nice those days were. Now Ram is the king. She's not getting that much pleasure because Ram doesn't have time for her. At that time, the whole time Ram had for her.
Yes.
It's very, very modern.
Very modern,
It was
yes.
written 1300 years back.
That is why I say it is a circle of time.
No, actually, for us, it is only Kalachak, right? There is no end of time and a judgment.
Yes, yes.
It's an eternal time.
Eternal time, yes.
So all these things keep cycling. So one of the beautiful examples, it comes in one of the Tamil Ramayans, also it comes in Telugu, is the argument Sita gives to go to forest. Ram says, I have to go. Some versions of South Indian versions of Sanskrit Valmiki Ramayana also it is there. Ram says, I don't want to go. I don't want you to come. I have been asked to go. Why should you come? You stay in the Ayodhya itself, just like how Lakshman said. But Sita is no Urmila to obey it.
Mm.
Sita gives many arguments, Ram gives counter arguments. Finally, Sita says one thing. In all the thousands of Ramayanas which happened before, Sita has gone with Ravan. So why not? Why not in this? And Ram has no reply for that. He says, "Okay, please come."
This is absolutely amazing. It is like the proof in a way of things repeating themselves. You know, like
so how does Ramayana end? Ramayana ends in this beautiful fashion,
yeah.
where the Hanuman is standing before the Ram as the bodyguard. So the Yama's another name is time. Kala,
Yes.
Yama. It's time. So death is nothing but time in our culture. And he is also called Dharma. Not the Hindi Dharma, but the Sanskrit Dharma.
Yes, yes.
He's a Dharmaraj, no? So time is a Dharmaraj. God is what? God is beyond this. That is why he is Kalake like Shiva or Kalapurish like Vishnu.
Yeah.
But Ram is a human. For him, the time has come. But the Yama is not able to enter because Hanuman is there. So what they do is they tell to Ram itself how this has to end. Even Ram has to end. This cannot go on eternally, no? Because he has come as a human. Human cannot live forever. So what should I do? Because Hanuman is not allowing to get in. So Ram, what he does, he takes his ring and puts it on the ground. So through a hole, it goes to the Patal Lok. And Ram says, only you can get it, Hanuman, you get it. So Hanuman becomes small, goes into the Patal. So Patal, the Indra of Patal is Mahabali, the virtuous Asura, who couldn't be defeated by the king. So Vaman had to come, Vishnu had to come as Vaman Avatar and cheat him and put him in the Patal Lok, and he's the Indra of Patal. He's a eternal, immortal. Hanuman comes there. So Mahabali says, okay, why have you come to the Asur Lok? He says that the ring has come, I have come to take. Mahabali says, I don't have a problem. You go and take. So where is the ring? So he says, see that mountain? You can take any ring from that and go. Because what? When Hanuman goes and sees, it's a huge mountain made of rings. Then Hanuman asks Mahabali, what is this? You are an immortal. You have been there from the start of the time. Then Mahabali says, in every yuga, the Ramayana happens. And same question is, no? And Hanuman comes. So Hanuman says, that what is the use of the ring? He has cheated me. He doesn't take the ring. He goes back. That's why so many rings are there. It's a repeat like Matrix. What they are taken. He goes back.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe the next thing you can do is write a science fiction. Absolutely, what we are thinking of now as future has already happened in the past.
So there is this great tale which comes in, I think it's in Rigveda, where I forgot the name suddenly. The king wants to have a son-in-law. Like any father, he feels whichever person is coming is not good enough to become my son-in-law. He rejects whoever comes. And daughter also says, whatever my father chooses, only I will take. Finally, he goes to Brahmalok. And when he has gone to Brahmalok, Saraswati is playing the Veena. So Brahma says, wait, let us talk. So Saraswati completes one raga. And this king says, I have come for this. I want your suggestion to become, to get a son-in-law. Then Brahma starts laughing. All other gods there, Saraswati, everybody starts laughing. So he asks, why are you laughing? He says that 6 crore years have passed by the time you have come. When you go back, almost 6 crore years would be over. By the time you go back, you are time travel. You are all your daughter, their children, they have married children, and so many generations have come and gone, and they have born thousands of times already. In these 5 minutes, you were here until Saraswati finished this, because the time goes differently.
Yeah.
This concept is nothing new, perhaps.
Yes, it's not you, and it's in a way, not fair. They have written everything. They have not left anything.
I think the soma they used to drink was quite potent.
Yes, absolutely.
We are yet to find what they were drinking so that we could write that.
Absolutely. It's been, I think, should we open for the audience question? It's been very interesting to talk to you, and I wish we had more time so that we could go on and get on to these wonderful versions and interpretations and anecdotes from you. But I think time is
perhaps next year when COVID is over, we may have an offline.
We will do a proper face-to-face thing.
Yeah, we would just love you to come there actually and regale us with some more of these stories. They are just fascinating. And the more you read, the more they seem to be evolving all the time, no?
I mean, you have to arrange for some soma also. A little bit, you could read from your book.
I don't mind reading. It's better to have a conversation. If it is direct,
conversation.
If it is direct, I can just see who is sleeping and stop it.
I think we had a couple of questions. Pratiaksha, if you can read them out.
Okay, I can see all of
questions.
Them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is Ram God or human? Why have you written it as Valmiki's women? I think these are the few questions.
Yeah,
a few more are there.
Yeah. Yes.
First thing, why I call them as Valmiki's women? All these characters except Shanta comes in Valmiki. He was the first person to conceive it. If I had to write just like how Valmiki did, why should I write? Valmiki has written it so beautifully. So I am not translating Valmiki's Ramayana. I am not capable of that also. Even though I know a bit of Sanskrit, I am not capable of the wonderful translations have come. It has what is to be done has already been done. It's my humble attempt to bring forth some other viewpoints from many of the folk tales. It's not that I not put this thing into that, but the inspiration is from many folk tales, oral storytelling tradition. I think not even 5% of it we are captured in print or in the media. There is so much tradition going around in India. That's what I said. Before COVID, 2-3 years back, Mumbai where I live, there was this international Ramayana fest. Maharashtra government had arranged it. Ramayana from Philippines, Ramayana from Indonesia, Ramayana from Bali, Burma, Cambodia, Mongolia and all had come to perform. So before that, one funny thing had happened. I had given a 2-hour lecture to a group of VIPs. Mostly at that time, Fadnavis ji was the chief minister and a lot of people were there. So I told that at least 30 Ramayanas have Sita as the daughter of Ravana. Sita is the daughter of Ravana. In Asura also I used that. At least 30 of them are there and none of them are new. They are at least 1,500 to 2,000 years old. Some are more than that. There was a lot of commotion. They said, no, it's not possible. I said, no, I have come across it. Then after that, the performance started. Performance was from Cambodia, performance from Indonesia, performance from Mongolia. All of them have Sita as Ravana's daughter. Performance from Philippines. This is a tradition. From where it has gone? From India, southern part of India, it has gone to the sea trade. To Philippines, Indonesia, and then gone to the mainland China, gone to East Mongolia and all. So all the Ramayanas went from the south, and the Jain Ramayana, Sita is the daughter of Ravan, which entirely changes the perspective of Ramayana. then where is the evil in Ravan?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can I come in for a minute here, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. In one of the Ramayanas, I guess from Malaysia or Indonesia,
Yeah.
I think they say, we have been told that Hanuman is a brahmachari. But I
Correct.
think in one of the Ramayans, it has been told that when Hanuman goes to Sri Lanka, he gets kind of, close to Mandodari, and they have a daughter. And that daughter becomes very important part of the Ramayana story later on in one of these countries, probably Malaysia or Indonesia.
Indonesia itself, there are multiple versions. Another is, it will be shocking for us if you say, but Hanuman is a Casanova in some versions. He has multiple voices.
Yes,
He's Krishna.
exactly.
He's like Krishna.
Yeah.
He's like Krishna. So that version also is there. There are versions where it is Sita who kills Ravan. Saktaya versions. So that's why I said, please hear many Ramayanas, many women, both in English and Hindi. It is not in my host voice. It is in the voice of voice artist. So they have done a beautiful job. I have written it. It's a 15-16 hours of introducing all these Ramayanas, a glimpse of all these Ramayanas. But I tell the entire Ramayana story from the beginning, but whenever it reaches somewhere, I say in Kamba Ramayana, Sita Swayamvar is like this. In the Muslim Ramayana, it is like this. There is a Ramayana where all characters are Muslims and pray to Allah. They do namaz 5 times a day. There is a Catholic Ramayana where Ram attends mass. So there is no end to the. It is beyond religion actually. To really say.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think once again, can I tell
Yes,
you
sir.
that in one of the Indonesian versions of Mahabharata,
Hmm.
Yudhishthir at the end of the tale, he turns a Muslim. He turns, he gets a convert, and he dies as a Muslim, not as a Hindu. In one of the Indonesian Mahabharata versions of.
It is there. Mahabharata is much more vaster than this. So Mahabharata, Ramayana, coming to Ramayana, the place where I come from, not exactly the place where I come from. Now I have a writing retreat in a place called Wayanad. Now it will be famous because Rahul Gandhi's constituency. Otherwise, it's a sleepy hill town in Kerala. It's a tea estates and other things. It's a jungle town, Nilgiri forest. There, the tribals have a Ramayana. Okay. For them, the entire thing happened in the Nilgiri forest. Ayodhya is there. They believe Ayodhya is there, Lanka is there beyond Kabani River, Sita's ashram is there. Entire Ramayana circuit is there.
Okay.
And in that, Ravan has tea estates. He's the owner of tea estates. Coffee plantations, spice plantation.
Yeah.
He says, see, I have, instead of Pushpak Vipanu, he says I have so much tea estates and coffee plantations. Because it evolved, as it evolved, when it would have written long back, but as it evolved, all this got added in the oral storytelling. So what they have seen, when the British came, the rich man has tea estates. So Ravan has tea estates. So there,
That is the beauty. Everybody has
Yeah.
appropriated Ramayana.
Yeah,
for-
exactly. Yeah, it just belongs.
That's amazing. I mean, that is
to
how
the story. Yeah.
that is how cultures, develop, emerge rather than
Yeah.
religion. Religion, it is more the subcontinent culture in a way. Beyond that also.
it's beyond,
Beyond that.
Well, Ramayana has gone to Arabia, it has taken different forms, but Mahabharata also. It has gone
I'm
different
really
forms.
interested in that the Muslim version you're saying. It is there in the audiobook. I'm going to listen to it then.
I have told the glimpses, but I think in YouTube even translations are available. Where
Okay.
people have totally translated it because these are all traditional things. so it
Yeah.
doesn't have-
Yes. Yes.
I have just said because I cannot. First thing, I
Natural.
don't know all the Ramayanas. I know a few.
Yeah.
That's all. So whatever I knew, 15-16 hours it has taken to tell it. So I cannot narrate each of the Ramayanas because I'm not a scholar. I'm a storyteller. So whatever I know here and there, then only I put it. This is left to who take PhD on that. I with great difficulty passed my engineering.
So
You know,
you're an
in-
engineer, and from there you've come to a wonderful journey.
But do you know, in this country, it would be extremely blasphemous to talk about Ramayana in any other way. Remember, about 10-15 years ago, Delhi University had prescribed A.K. Ramanujan's 300 Ramayans essay. And there was such a hue and cry, they had to withdraw it. They finally had to withdraw it from the course. And it was not allowed to, go into the syllabus. So in India, I think it's not possible. Maybe other countries are doing what they are doing about these stories.
In India,
because-
maybe it's a recent phenomenon, sir, because recently, means I have seen it in childhood also. A 300-year-old, written 300 years back, there is this Kathakali which is even performed even now in temples. Last time when I went to my village, the village temple, they were performing it, this Duryodhana Vadam. In that Kathakali, Duryodhana is a hero. So Duryodhana says to, so I have been inspired by all these things. In my Ajaya, where Duryodhana is a hero, it's from Kaurava perspective. Duryodhana tells to Karna that he understands Karna is, how the plot is, Karna is told, Kunti comes to Karna, Dushasan hears it. Dushasan comes and tells Duryodhana, this fellow is cheating you and kill him. When Karna comes, Duryodhana says that I heard you are one of the Pandavas, but you were born before Kunti had married. Otherwise, I would have given the kingdom to you because you are the rightful honor. But to Pandavas, I won't give because there is no proof also to who they were born. Kunti lived in the forest and comes and says they are born from gods. Because for me, I am born from my father and mother. They are born from gods is a claim. She and 5 munis came and told. And even if they are born from gods, what have gods got to do with my kingdom? It's a human kingdom. We are not talking about something else. And then thirdly, he's telling, my father may be blind. I am not blind. Pandu was a regent king because he's a younger brother. My father was blind. He was ruling for him. Then you say Pandu cannot, when Pandu died, then you allowed the same blind king to rule. So you were giving earlier saying it's a blind king, so let the younger brother rule. The younger brother died. Then for years, my father only ruled as a blind king. So what was the problem? So I am the first son of the actual king. Why should go to the cousins, wives, outside marriage, children? Frankly, he is asking it. In the temple, this is what it is happening. And this is not written yesterday. It was written 300 years back and people clap. So there's a tradition actually. That tradition still exists. It's nothing new. Not now, like 2200 years before Basa had written Padyaratra, Basa had written Uruvanga, where Duryodhana exclaims to Yudhishthir, what have you gained after all this fight? You have got a kingdom of widows and orphans. For what it doesn't belong to you, you fought, you pawned, you fought. Your wife was stripped and you didn't do anything. And you call yourself Dharma, and when it was required, you lied. So all your Dharma was a practice for telling this one great lie to win. What is the difference between you and me? So all these questions have been asked. There is nothing, as I said, the Soma was very important. There was nothing much to ask. We can only tell it in our voice again and again. But these things, I mean, this country has always been thrived on opposites, contrasting, contradicting things. That's why atheism is one of the darshanas. Agnosticism is one of the darshanas. So, what they call as Indian morality now is nothing but the Victorian era morality, the garbage which the medieval Europe has thrown. We have brought it here and say that this is our culture. This is not our culture.
That's true. That's very true.
What we understand morality now and then what we see in Mahabharata and Ramayana, it's absolutely like way beyond.
Madam, people say a woman wears jeans, they say Indian culture is gone. They should go and see the temples in Konark, in Chidambaram, in Madurai, in all the thousand
All the temples, all the
temples, none of them are wearing upper clothes itself. Forget about jeans. So there is nothing wrong with that. That was the way people were like that.
It was a way of life then.
Because it's a tropical country. We are all, we overeat, we overdress because we imitate the West. Actually, we all do overdressing, right? In such a hot country. So they were dressed, they didn't want to imitate or they didn't want to impress anyone. They were like how any tropical country people would dress. And now if somebody wears a skirt, then Indian culture is gone. Then what will you do with all these cultures? What will you do with all the paintings, which are UNESCO painting and whatnot? So what Indian culture we are talking about? If you really go to Indian culture, we are much more freer society. We are trying to become the Victorian era, because during the Victorian era, a lot of judgment was placed on Indians, saying that this is moral, this is not moral, because they were being judged with the commandments. And we being ruled, we started feeling ashamed of whatever it was. I'm not saying it gave a lot of good things, but that doesn't owe to Victoria. It comes to after 50 years after that. We owe the democracy. We are perhaps living, one way of looking at it is we are perhaps living at the best times, best of the times. One way of looking at this. Because whatever you say about any holy book, they are beautiful, fascinating. But what has given human dignity to all humans, not to certain people, whether it is males or female, whether it is this caste or that caste, whichever is the religion, is the Indian Constitution. So we are living in the best of the times. We don't follow any religious book, which is very personal, which is how it should be. So that way, perhaps on an average, we are living in the best of the times, the last 70 years since we adopted our constitution, where some is not discriminated against another. When compared to any religious text of any religion in any world, because most of them, 99% of them, we have to pick and choose for good things, because most of them are written by tribal people with their thing. You can always compare, some was better than the other, some are comparable to others, but we cannot blame them. That was their scientific knowledge at that time. That was the level of knowledge they had reached at that time, and they did a wonderful job of that at that time. But when we sit today, if you talk about human rights, if you talk about human dignity, if you talk about equality before law, I think perhaps this is the only time in history of the world, not only in India, across the world, we have progressed a lot. Maybe we regress because many people want theological states, whichever is the religion. We may regress back. These things keeps happening. But as of now, at least for the last 70 years, we can vouch that theoretically at least, we have a beautiful constitution which gives dignity to everyone. Nobody says you are a woman, so you don't become this. We had women prime minister here, we had one presidents here. We had rulers from different castes who were not even allowed to walk on the road 100 years back. So yes, we have made a great progress. So while having a lot of pride, while celebrating our great culture and civilization, we should not forget is what I feel. That's what I try to tell in my books also. That my characters talk like today's character, because today is the best time in the entire culture we had, at least theoretically. I know there will be a lot of difference of opinion, but that's my take.
Just like the versions of Mahabharata and Ramayana, we'll have different takes on present times.
No, present in the sense is not today, or it's not last year, or it's not 5 years, it's not 10 years. I'm telling the scale of time.
I agree with you.
This century has been the best for us. Last 100 years could have been the best for us. Perhaps.
Absolutely. Okay, so anybody else wants to ask anything? We have Anand here, and you've got an opportunity to ask him anything that you want.
Is Ram God or a human? I think I answered that. Ram is a human avatar. So he will have all the flaws of human. It doesn't mean all humans have equal number of flaws, but he will have some flaws. That's what I mean.
I think I can't see any more questions.
Yeah, I don't think there are any questions. Just people saying very interesting concepts and how they're enjoying the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, and we have put out a link in case people are keen to order the book. I would definitely urge you to buy the book, because...
Can I ask the last question if there is...
I would like to show the book.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll ask Mr. Anand.
Yes, sir.
Since you are saying that Ram is a human, so when did this transformation occur that he became a god?
Again, what is God in Indian concept? Here, everyone, again, this is a confusion arising from the concept of God itself, right? So that is why all these doubts come. In Indian concept, anyone can become God. So Gandhiji was asked this question. Gandhiji said, it is not the historical Ram I pray. The God which I pray to is my conscience. I call it Ram. You can call it Allah. You can call it Jesus. You can call it anything you want. So the fundamental concept is Aham Brahmasmi, I am the God. Some people know it. Some people don't. Some people realize it later. So Ram, in the Bhakti, when the Bhakti era happened, Actually, this interesting conversation came between Vivekananda and Ramakrishna. It's anecdotal. I don't know whether it is there somewhere written. I heard it from other masters who have told it. So I'll just narrate it before closing this. Vivekananda said, why do you pray like this? Because Ramakrishna used to dress up as, it's called Bhava Bhakti. He dresses up as sometimes as Radha, sometimes as a woman. He plays role and he does the worship. He does as Kali Bhakt, he does all formats of worship. Sometimes he takes, like a Muslim, he does all this thing. So he was, Vivekananda asked him, this is, worshipping God doesn't make sense to me. Because one time you are telling you are God, we are all the part of God, we are the reflection. You are talking about Advaita, like what Shankara said. At the same time, you are also doing the worship like any other bhakt. What is happening? So Ramakrishna said, it is like when you are small, you need a, what do you call, those days, now you call it walker. So I'm using the same thing. No, the kids will use that to walk. When after that you grow up, then you have got enough energy, you walk yourself, you run, you do everything. Then you become old. Then again you will have a stick. The ideal worship, the God, the worshipping of God is the stick. Will you ever, he asked it, if you are seeing an old man who is holding a stick and walking, will you go and take the stick away and say that walk properly, why are you using the stick? Where is your compassion? So those who are using idol worship, they are just like the people who need. So there is nothing wrong. Today, I feel weak, I hold the stick. Tomorrow, I don't want the stick, I throw it away. You have to understand only this. So God is the projection from your own mind. So that's why I said, when you offer God concept, borders on atheism or agnosticism. It's almost borders that. So it is not the sky daddy. It's not the judgment God who is going to judge you one day, the perfect God who at the end of the world. That is another way of looking at life. So I'm not saying that is wrong, but don't confuse with these, is what our darsanas talk. So if somebody is doing, that is why during Ganesha Nimanjan or Kali Nimanjan in Calcutta, Durga Nimanjan in Calcutta, what are you doing? First you make the idol, right? How did the concept, now it is very common. So you put a pandal, we can make money. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking generally how it was. You make it with your hand. It is a Sankalpa Murti. You say this is God. 9 days, 10 days, 1 month, 15 days, depending on your family tradition, 7 days, 3 days, you pray to it. Then you go and throw it. It's called Visarjan. What is Visarjan? Actual translation of Visarjan. It's waste. You are throwing it. Actually, right? Because for the entire year, you have taken the power out of it. First, you make it. You are the creator of God. And God is also the creator of you. God makes you and you make the God. That's what you are doing in your day-to-day tradition. No? So this is the concept behind that. Then it is a celebration. It's a way of coming together. These are all what you get as side perks. But that is why it is not permanently kept. It is gone and put into the water, and the element to element it goes. Not if you make it plaster of Paris, but if you make properly with mud, it goes back to the river. And what is that? That you have come, you are just a reflection of it. You have got a form now. That is you. Where inside there is a God. Tomorrow you will go back to the earth. Dust to dust, as they say in Bible. You go back. And the cycle continues. The life cycle continues. So all these darshanas, if you go inside, it is like reaching, that's what Krishna says, all the rivers reach the same sea. All these parts, including atheism, agnosticism, the bhakti, the bhava bhakti, without the bhava bhakti, the idol worship, without idol worshipping God, every path will reach the same place. It is your choice. It is like you wearing, today you want to wear this dress, today you wear that, tomorrow you want to wear a t-shirt, you do that. Who is there to judge? Even belief should be like that. That's what Ramakrishna says. Today I want to be a Muslim, I'm a Muslim. Tomorrow I want to be a Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist. Day after tomorrow afternoon, I think I have to be an atheist. I live as an atheist. What is wrong with that? Difficult to wrap around? But that is what our things say. That I'm just telling what I heard, and I believe in that.
It's a totally fascinating conversation, also very liberating, I must say, in many ways. Listen to all this. Pratiksha, you see another question?
There is one question. What is Amit Rao? He is asking, what is the difference between religion, literature, philosophy, and perspective?
Ideally, there should not be any difference. Ideally, these are all parts of life. See, religion, as in Sapiens, Yuval puts it so beautifully. Religion is a tool. Without religion, humanity would not have reached this point. It's a tool to bring together people and get things done. So that way, religion works. If you take it like a club, it's great. You enjoy it. Like Lions Club or Rotary Club, you go to the church or the temple or the mosque, you take it as a club. Don't get offended and don't come after me. I won't tell you the address. If you take it as a club, it's a place to mingle with people, to be kind to one another, to have this thing. Until then, religion is great. There is no word for religion in Indian languages. At least maybe from Urdu it may be there. I'm talking about other Indian languages. Urdu is also an Indian language, but other Indian languages, there is no word. Sanskrit, there is no word for religion. Malayalam, there is no word for religion. Tamil, there is no word for religion. Kannada, there is no word for religion. Marathi, there is no word for religion, unless you borrow it from English or Urdu or Persian. It's called, most languages either dharma or darsana, that is viewpoint, perspective. In Sanskrit, is darsana always,
Yes.
perspective. In Tamil, Malayalam and all, it's mata. Mata means opinion, just opinion. Mata is there or perspective is there. There is nothing called philosophy for us. It's always darshana. This all only the same two words. Philosophy is a very Greek this thing, no? This it's a logic of mind. But this is about your perspective. Darshana is what is your darshan? How you see life, how you see the world. So it's Bauddha darshan, it's a Jaina darshan, it's a Sankhya darshan. It's not Sankhya. Sankhya Mata also is okay. It is my opinion. But Darshana is what you see it. Mata is just an opinion. You would have heard from someone else. This is the difference between that. This Darshana, you have to see that. You have to experience it. And literature is just a way of capturing ideas. It has got nothing, sacred about it. Just a way of capturing ideas. The ideas can be captured in many ways. Ideas can be captured in pictures, as sculptures, as thoughts, as drama, as poetry, as art, or as painting. 100,000 ways of capturing. Literature is just one among them. Nothing sacred or nothing profane about literature. Literature is there. It is required. It's the way we express ourselves. It's a capsule for ideas.
Okay, so you explained that so wonderfully. And, somehow during this conversation, you have done your little bit to move away from, the narrow definition of religion or the interpretation of a very linear or binary interpretation of good and bad. So in a way, it's always like so many windows are open and we let all the versions come into us and liberate us, to be non-judgmental towards whatever is happening around us. And you said something very nice, like the last 100 years have been a good time for humanity, whatever bad things we are seeing now. But when we look back on what things have happened in the past, I mean, the sort of cruelty and things that have happened, we are thankfully moving forward. And on this note that we have had amazing insights from you regarding Mahabharata and Ramayana, and I think Preeti has to ensure that we have a physical session with I don't want to add Soma again, but a nice proper lot of meat into the conversation. And
I am an asura. I don't take surapani as that is Soma. I'm a toddler.
We will have to find a different version of surapani.
The surapan jo karte hai wahi hai sur. No, that's asura hai. Don't take it.
That's again another interpretation you've given us today.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Jasmeet to please do the formal thank you from our side.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
It's my turn. It's oh my God. You are the proven storyteller. You know you won the award at 4 something years and you were competing with the seniors. You were a perfect storyteller. You could go non-stop. Oh my God. That's amazing. And
Thank
and
you.
and the way the love, ambition, devotion, everything, courage showing through your writings and the mytho-fiction that you write, your women are not submissive at all. They are powerful. And the way you bring out the narrative is it reflects your style. Now that we've listened to you, yes. And I love the karma angle that you brought out. It explains so many things, so many. And the timeless evolution of the stories and the epics, the way it keeps changing and recycling over the timeless times. And Prataksha, you were wonderful with your flow of questions and so very sensitive, yet a very powerful book. The way you brought it out and the way he narrated, we are enamored with your performances. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you